In these days of revolution and nation birthing in Sudan, Egypt, Tunisia, and the rest, it's good to think back to the height of the Cold War, when a nation's violent birth was nearly overlooked by the nation that could have helped the most.
Bangladesh, Bangladesh, where so many people are dying fast.
In 1971, Madison Square Garden was the venue for a legendary concert led by George Harrison to get the world to notice a violent genocide that was taking place in Bangladesh, a nation trying to break free from Pakistan.
Really wanna see you. Really wanna see you, Lord.
The concert for Bangladesh changed the world. It changed music and changed minds. It was the first ever rock concert for a cause of this kind. It highlighted the 3 million lives lost in the Bangladesh struggle for independence. And today, Bangladesh marks its 40th proud anniversary as a nation. While George Harrison's efforts to underscore the bloody consequences of a war in South Asia were a pop cultural phenomenon, it was a lone diplomat who convinced the U.S. government to step away from its preoccupation with the Cold War and focus on one of the worst genocides of the 20th century. Our partner, the BBC, has been speaking to some of those who were part of the U.S. mission in Bangladesh 40 years ago when U.S. Consul General Archer Blood stood up to President Nixon and Henry Kissinger to get them to intervene. Meg Blood, wife of Archer Blood, remembers the efforts made by her husband and others to get Washington to take a lead and denounce the violence, to no avail.
It was a strange silence. For instance, the really terrible attack on the university. The Hindu girls' dormitory was attacked. They set fire to the dormitory, and as the girls tried to run out of the fire, they were machine gunned.
Thousands of bodies were lying in the streets. U.S. staff were told to stay indoors or risk being shot by the Pakistan Army. But even trapped inside, diplomats knew the scale of death was both enormous and deliberate. Scott Butcher was part of the U.S. diplomatic mission in what was then called East Pakistan.
We could hear things. We could hear, kind of rhythmic fire, which my wife and I both thought sounded like executions. But there was just a rhythmic fire from one of the military camps. It was just bang, bang, bang.
The silence from Washington was partially due to the not well-known fact that Nixon and Kissinger had a deal with West Pakistan to help them open tantalizing doors in China. They were in no mood to criticize Pakistan. So diplomat Archer Blood needed to do something outrageous. The Blood telegram sent to Washington remains one of the most strongly worded messages ever sent by a Foreign Service officer to the State Department. It was signed by 29 Americans, including Consul General Archer Blood. Here's part of that diplomatic cable.
Subject: Dissent from U.S. policy toward East Pakistan. Our government has failed to denounce the suppression of democracy. Our government has failed to denounce atrocities.
Private Americans have expressed disgust. We, as professional public servants, express our dissent.
And fervently hope that our true and lasting interests here can be defined and our policies redirected in order to salvage our nation's position as a moral leader of the free world.
The cable roused a Cold War-obsessed Washington and started a change in policy. Blood was transferred out of Dhaka, and the Blood telegram, as it was called, was reclassified as secret. But the word was out. Thanks to our partners at the BBC for reading that telegram and for helping us with the interviews there. Joining us now is Howard Schaffer, former U.S. ambassador to Bangladesh. Good morning, sir. Ambassador Schaffer, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, I can hear you. Also with us is Dr. Sultan Ahmed, an American Bangladeshi who was a student in the U.S. at the time, took part in various protests, and has enjoyed a successful career as an economist at the World Bank. Doctor, good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning.
Howard Schaffer, how important was the so-called Blood telegram in moving American policy?
Unfortunately, the Blood telegram was not important in moving American policy, in that the Nixon administration basically chose to ignore it. The impact of the Blood telegram was outside the U.S. government. The impact was on the American people and on Congress. But those of us within the department including me, who thought the Nixon-Kissinger approach was all wrong, really were not able to make our way in changing policy.
Howard Schaffer, former U.S. ambassador to Bangladesh, thinking about 40 years ago when the nation of Bangladesh was born. Dr. Sultan Ahmed, what do you think were the drivers at the time that changed the world opinion and really brought the focus to Bangladesh?
Well, there was massive protests throughout the world, not only by Bangladeshis, but people, well-meaning people. They didn't want to see the genocide. And gradually, even though we thought the United States government was not supporting the movement, the massive killing that went on, that probably may have softened the U.S. positions. And of course, when India came in, things moved very quickly and the conflict ended.
We're talking with Dr. Sultan Ahmed, an American Bangladeshi, a student in the U.S. at the time of the revolution that created the state of Bangladesh. Howard Schaffer, former U.S. ambassador to Bangladesh. Is the lesson of Bangladesh that the U.S. has a tendency or a record of getting distracted by the sort of huge elements of realpolitik, and that a humanitarian crisis like this can occur? And have we learned that lesson?
I hope that we've learned that lesson. Bangladesh was in many respects a unique case in that the Nixon and Kissinger almost alone were pursuing this opening to China, using Pakistan as the way to create that opening. But this was not known widely. It was known hardly by anyone else in the U.S. government. This was their driving force, and they saw it not only as an opening to China, but as a way of revamping the way the Cold War was being waged, isolating the Soviet Union. So it was tremendously important to them. But no one else really knew about this, knew that that was a driving force.
But it set in motion this dynamic of appeasing Pakistan to achieve other ends, something we live with today.
The appeasing of Pakistan stemmed from that, and it was unexplained and basically unexplainable because they were unwilling to talk about the prospect of opening China via Pakistan. But it was a highly immoral policy which, as you know, earned a great deal of opprobrium among the American public and Congress and many people within the government, specifically the State Department itself.
And around the world. Howard Schaffer remembers it well, former U.S. ambassador to Bangladesh. Dr. Sultan Ahmed, thoughts on the 40th anniversary of the creation of Bangladesh before we go?
Well, the whole country was united at the time to fight off an enemy, and we have had 40 years. Unfortunately, the country is now divided amongst people, and the goal for which we fought and became independent is yet to be achieved. We are waiting for saner policies to prevail in the ruling party so that we have a peaceful country emerging out of all of that.
Dr. Sultan Ahmed, an American Bangladeshi who's been a successful economist at the World Bank, and Howard Schaffer, former U.S. ambassador to Bangladesh, remembering the birth of a nation 40 years ago. Thanks so much.